Last spring, a retired schoolteacher in Dorset received a letter from her local council threatening a fine of up to $5,000. Not for noise, not for an illegal extension, for what she'd been growing in her garden pond for 11 years. The plant was parrot's feather, a pretty feathery aquatic species she'd bought from a garden centre in 2013 for $4.99. It's been banned from sale in the UK since April 2014 under the Wildlife and Countryside Act. She had no idea, and she's not alone. According to the Royal Horticultural Society, millions of British gardeners are unknowingly growing, spraying, burning, or building things in their gardens that now carry fines, prosecution, or both. 25 of these methods are so common that most of us have done at least 3 of them in the past year alone. Today, I'm going through every single one. Some will surprise you, some will genuinely shock you, and by the end, you'll know exactly how to protect yourself. Let's start with the garden itself, with the living things rooted in your soil. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. There are at least 14 plant species sitting on shelves and in British gardens right now that could technically put you on the wrong side of the law, and most of them were sold legally when you bought them. Japanese knotweed is the one everybody's heard of. It can grow through concrete, tarmac, and building foundations. Under the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981, it is illegal to plant it or cause it to grow in the wild, and if it spreads from your garden to a neighbor's property, you can face fines of up to $5,000, or in serious cases, unlimited fines and even a prison sentence of up to 2 years. Estate agents are now legally required to declare its presence when selling a property. A 3-bedroom semi in Leeds lost $38,000 off its asking price in 2023 because of a single patch in the back garden. The removal cost? Another $4,500. But knotweed is only the headline. Giant hogweed, that towering dramatic plant the Victorians imported as an ornamental centerpiece, is far more dangerous on a personal level. Its sap contains furanocoumarins, chemicals that react with sunlight to cause severe burns, blistering, and scarring that can last for months and sometimes permanently mark the skin. Children are particularly vulnerable because the plant grows in ditches, riverbanks, and the edges of neglected gardens where they play. It's illegal to plant it, and you're required to prevent it from spreading from your property. Then there's Himalayan balsam, the tall, pink-flowered plant that towers along riverbanks every summer. It looks beautiful. Wildlife photographers love it. But each plant produces up to 800 seeds, which can be flung up to 7 meters, and it outcompetes almost every native wildflower in its path. Illegal to plant or cause to grow in the wild. Here's where most gardeners trip up though. It's not the famous invaders that catch people out. It's the pond plants. In April 2014, the UK government banned the sale of 5 of the worst invasive aquatic species: floating pennywort, water fern, parrot's feather, Australian swamp stonecrop, and curly waterweed. Floating pennywort can double its mass in 4 days under favourable conditions. Even a tiny fragment, smaller than your thumbnail, can regenerate into a full plant and choke an entire waterway. If you bought pond plants before 2014, there's a reasonable chance one of these is in your garden right now. You won't be prosecuted simply for having them, but if they spread beyond your property, through overflow, bird transfer, or careless disposal, you could face legal action. And composting them is not safe disposal. These plants regenerate from fragments. They need to be bagged, dried completely, and binned. Chilean rhubarb, Gunera tinctoria, is another one that catches people off guard. Those giant architectural leaves look spectacular beside a water feature. Garden designers adore them. But both Gunera tinctoria and its close relative Gunera manicata are now listed under EU Regulation 1143/2014 on invasive alien species retained in UK law after Brexit. It is illegal to import, keep, propagate, transport, sell, grow, or cultivate them. If you already have one, you are expected to take measures to control it. The same regulation covers golden wreath wattle and several other ornamentals that were freely available 10 or 15 years ago. And then there's opium poppy. Parva somniferum. You can buy the seeds at any garden centre. They're gorgeous flowers, and thousands of British gardeners grow them every year without a second thought. Technically, growing them as ornamental plants is tolerated. But under the Misuse of Drugs Act, cultivating them with any intent to extract opium is a criminal offence carrying up to 14 years in prison. The law hinges on intent. A few poppies in your cottage garden border, nobody blinks. A large concentrated planting with evidence of seed head scoring, that's a very different conversation. Cannabis is the obvious one, but worth stating clearly. Growing it in your garden, greenhouse, or spare bedroom is illegal in the UK regardless of the purpose: personal, medical, or decorative. The irony is that industrial hemp, a close relative, can be grown legally with a Home Office license. But that license requires a criminal records check, an approved site, and annual inspections. In Scotland, the law goes further than the rest of the UK. The Wildlife and Natural Environment Act 2011 makes it illegal to plant any non-native plant species in the wild. Not just invasive ones. The definition of wild can extend to verges, common land, and shared green spaces bordering your garden. A well-meaning gardener in Edinburgh, who scattered wildflower seeds along a public footpath in 2022, technically committed an offence. Now let me take you inside the garden shed. Because the chemical story is, in many ways, more troubling than the plant story. And it starts with something almost every allotment holder in Britain has used at some point: metaldehyde slug pellets. Those little blue pellets that every gardener scattered around their lettuce for decades. Banned. The use ban came into full force on the 31st of March 2022, after years of regulatory battles. The Health and Safety Executive and the UK Expert Committee on Pesticides concluded that metaldehyde posed an unacceptable risk to birds and mammals. It was leaching into rivers and freshwater systems. Dogs were ingesting pellets and dying. A Staffordshire Terrier in Bristol collapsed and died in 2020 after eating pellets from a neighbouring garden. Pellets the neighbour had bought legally just 3 years earlier. DEFRA originally announced the ban in 2019. It was overturned due to a procedural error after commercial growers launched a judicial review. Then it was reinstated. If you have old blue slug pellets at the back of your shed, they are now illegal to use. Your council's Household Waste Recycling Centre can advise on safe disposal. The neonicotinoid story is broader and, some would argue, more consequential. These systemic insecticides, which are absorbed into every tissue of a treated plant, including pollen and nectar, were linked to catastrophic declines in bee populations. The EU banned outdoor use of 3 neonicotinoids in 2018: imidacloprid, clothianidin, and thiamethoxam. The UK initially followed that ban. But the twist: post-Brexit, the UK government has granted emergency authorizations for neonicotinoid use on sugar beet crops in multiple years since. For home gardeners, the outdoor use ban holds. But the fact that these chemicals are still being applied to UK farmland while garden use is prohibited raises questions about whose interests the regulations actually serve. Here's something most people don't realize. It is illegal to use household products as pesticides in your garden unless they've been specifically tested and approved for that purpose. That washing up liquid spray your mum uses on greenfly? Technically unlawful. The vinegar and salt weed killer recipe shared thousands of times on Facebook gardening groups? Not authorized. The bleach your neighbor pours on his patio weeds? Illegal under UK pesticide regulations. The RHS is unequivocal on this point. Using household products as garden pesticides can damage plants, soil, and soil organisms, and may harm the wider environment. The fact that something is in your kitchen cupboard does not mean it has been tested or licensed for outdoor use. The Health and Safety Executive maintains a database of every product authorized for use as a pesticide in the UK. If it's not on that list, it is not legal to use it as one, regardless of what the internet tells you. Glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, remains legal in the UK, but its status is increasingly precarious. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classified it as probably carcinogenic to humans in 2015. multiple countries have restricted or banned it. In the UK, it is still available to home gardeners, but the RHS no longer recommends the use of any weed killers and advises non-chemical alternatives as a first approach. Several UK councils have already stopped using glyphosate on public land. The direction of travel is clear, even if the ban hasn't arrived yet. Then there are the chemicals that simply disappeared from shelves without most gardeners noticing. Diclofenac, once a common granular weed killer for paths, withdrawn. Chlorpyrifos, a broad-spectrum insecticide used for decades. Banned across the EU and UK in 2020 due to developmental neurotoxicity concerns. Diuron, used in path weed killers, removed from UK approval. If you've got old bottles and boxes in your garden shed with peeling labels from 2015 or earlier, there's a decent chance you're storing chemicals that are no longer legal to apply. Post-Brexit, the gap between UK and EU pesticide standards has widened significantly. According to Pesticide Action Network UK, at least 36 pesticides remain legal in the UK that are now banned across the EU. 13 of those are classified as highly hazardous pesticides under UN guidelines. 4 are highly toxic to bees. 12 are classified as carcinogens. 9 are endocrine disruptors. A proposed alignment deal with the EU could force changes as early as next year, but lobbying from industry groups has been fierce. The pesticide trade body CropLife UK has warned that overnight alignment could cost British agriculture up to $810 million. For home gardeners, the practical reality is this. Some products available in UK garden centres today would be illegal to sell in France, Germany, or Spain. Now, this next cluster is the one that catches the most people, because it's not about rare plants or specialist chemicals. It's about things millions of British gardeners do every single weekend without realizing there are rules. Garden bonfires. There's no blanket ban on bonfires in the UK. That's the first thing to understand. But there is a dense web of regulation that makes many common bonfire practices illegal. Under the Environmental Protection Act 1990, you cannot burn household waste in a way that causes pollution or harms people's health. Under Section 161A of the Highways Act 1980, allowing smoke to drift across a nearby road is a criminal offense if it poses a danger to traffic. Your local council has the power to investigate smoke from your garden as a potential statutory nuisance, and if they issue an abatement notice, ignoring it carries a fine. In smoke control areas, which cover large parts of urban Britain under the Clean Air Act 1993, burning anything that produces visible smoke may be prohibited entirely, and burning treated wood, painted timber, plastics, rubber, or any synthetic material is categorically illegal. A grandmother in Sunderland was fined $300 in 2021 for regularly burning old fence panels in her garden incinerator. The panels were treated with preservative chemicals. She'd been doing it for years. Fence height. Your back garden fence cannot exceed 2 meters without planning permission. Your front garden fence cannot exceed 1 meter. Breach those limits without approval, and the council can issue an enforcement notice requiring you to reduce the height at your own expense. Tree felling. If a tree in your garden is covered by a tree preservation order, and you may not know whether it is unless you check with your local planning authority, cutting it down, lopping branches, or even significant pruning without permission is a criminal offense. Fines can reach $20,000 in a magistrate's court. In a conservation area, you must give your council 6 weeks written notice before doing any work on any tree with a trunk diameter greater than 75 millimeters. Peat compost. This is a slow-moving ban that has been stalled by industry lobbying for over a decade. The UK government first set targets to phase out horticultural peat use in 2011. In 2022, DEFRA announced that sales of bagged peat compost would be banned by the end of 2024. That date has now been pushed back. Some peat products will be banned from shelves in 2027. Others, used by professional growers, won't face a ban until 2030. The environmental case is overwhelming. UK peatlands store approximately 3.2 billion tons of carbon. When peat is extracted and dried for compost, that carbon is released. Roughly 60% of the peat used in UK horticulture is imported, meaning Britain effectively offshores its peatland emissions. 95% of respondents to DEFRA's public consultation supported a ban. The ban keeps getting delayed regardless. Overhanging branches. You have the right to cut branches from a neighbor's tree that overhang your property, but only to the boundary line, and you are legally required to offer the cuttings back to your neighbor because they remain their property. Drop them over the fence and you could be prosecuted for fly tipping. Cut beyond the boundary line and you're committing trespass. If any branches fall and damage your neighbor's property during trimming, you're liable for repairs. Collecting and eating fruit from a neighbor's overhanging tree, even if the apples fell into your garden naturally, that's theft. They remain your neighbor's property under UK law. Taking them without permission carries the same legal weight as shoplifting. It's one of those laws that's rarely enforced, but it's on the books. Ragwort control. Common ragwort, that tall yellow wildflower that appears on verges and grassland, isn't technically illegal to grow. But under the Weeds Act 1959 and the Ragwort Control Act 2003, if it grows on your land near where horses or livestock graze, you are legally required to control it. Ragwort contains pyrrolizidine alkaloids, which cause irreversible liver damage in horses when ingested. Failure to control it can result in an enforcement notice from DEFRA and, ultimately, prosecution. Allotment holders whose plots border paddocks need to be particularly vigilant. CCTV cameras in your garden. You can install security cameras, but under the UK Data Protection Act, they must only capture images of your own property. If your camera points into a neighbor's garden, you may be in breach of data protection law. And here's one that surprises everyone. If you have a trampoline near the boundary, children bouncing on it can constitute a privacy intrusion under Article 8 of the Human Rights Act, the right to respect for private and family life. I need to pause here for a moment, because something connects every single entry on this list, and it's worth naming. The common thread isn't dangerous. It isn't environmental damage. It's information asymmetry. In almost every case, the product or practice was sold to the public as safe and normal. The slug pellets were on the shelf at B&Q. The pond plants were recommended by garden center staff. The bonfire was how your father got rid of hedge trimmings every autumn. And then, quietly, the regulations changed. But nobody knocked on your door to tell you. Nobody recalled the products. Nobody sent a leaflet. The law shifted, and you were expected to just know. That's the real scandal here. Not that these methods were banned. In most cases, the science and the environmental evidence fully justify the restrictions, but that ordinary people were left holding the liability for products and practices that industries profited from for decades. The metaldehyde manufacturers fought the ban in court. The peat industry lobbied to delay it by a decade. The pesticide trade group is right now spending money to keep EU-banned chemicals available in the UK. And when the bans eventually arrive, it's the retired couple in Dorset with a pond plant, or the allotment holder in Sheffield with old slug pellets who face fines. The good news is that every banned method on this list has a legal, effective, and often cheaper replacement. For slug control, ferric phosphate pellets remain legal and are classified as suitable for organic growing. Better still, encouraging natural predators. Hedgehogs, frogs, ground beetles, thrushes. Through habitat creation costs nothing. Copper tape around pots, evening handpicking, and nematode biological controls all work without any chemical input at all. For pond plants, native alternatives are abundant and safer. Hornwort, water forget-me-not, marsh marigold, and yellow flag iris are all beautiful, legal, and supportive of native wildlife. The RHS website has a full list of recommended pond plants that pose no invasive risk. For weed control, the RHS now recommends non-chemical methods as the default. Hoeing, mulching with bark or compost, hand weeding, and flame weeding are all legal and effective. A thick layer of cardboard underneath bark mulch will suppress weeds on paths for an entire season without a single drop of herbicide. For compost, peat-free alternatives have improved dramatically. The Royal Horticultural Society is set to be fully peat-free by the end of 2025, and their trials with 8 major wholesale growers have demonstrated that millions of plants can be grown commercially without peat. Look for composts based on wood fiber, coir, composted bark, or green waste. They cost roughly the same and work well. For garden waste disposal, your council's green waste collection service, home composting, or a licensed garden waste removal service are all legal, easy, and avoid any risk of prosecution. Composting at home produces rich, free fertilizer for your beds. It takes a few months, but it's the most economical option by far. Your garden is not just a patch of soil with some plants in it. It's one of the last spaces in modern Britain where you get to make daily choices about the land you stand on. What grows there? What feeds it? What lives in it? That's a privilege worth protecting. And protecting it starts with knowing the rules, even the ones nobody bothered to tell you about. I don't say any of this to frighten you. Most of these laws exist for genuinely good reasons. To protect waterways, wildlife, neighbors, and the long-term health of the ecosystems your garden sits within. The problem has never been the regulations themselves. The problem is that the industries which profited from selling you the now banned products were never required to clean up after themselves. That burden fell on you. So here's what I'd ask you to do this week. Walk out to your garden shed. Look at what's on the shelves. Check any chemical product against the HSE's authorized database. It's free and searchable online. Look at your pond, if you have one, and identify every plant species in it. Check whether any trees on your property are covered by a preservation order. A 5-minute call to your local planning office will tell you. These are small actions. They take minutes. But they're the difference between a garden that's a source of peace and one that lands you an unexpected letter from the council. I've got a full investigation into UK allotment regulations coming next, including the rules about keeping chickens, building sheds, and what happens when councils sell off allotment land. If you want to see which of those rules actually hold up to scrutiny, make sure you're subscribed so it reaches you. And if you found anything on this list that surprised you, or if you've had your own experience with a banned garden practice, drop it in the comments. Every story you share helps someone else avoid the same mistake. That's how this works, not through legislation, through community